Think great generals charge headfirst into battle? Think again. Today, we're diving into the shocking strategies of Pericles and Fabius Maximus, two ancient commanders who refused to fight, yet still won. These aren't just stories. They're masterclasses in strategy from ancient Greece and Rome. But here's the burning question. When your enemies are as fearsome as Sparta's hoplites or Hannibal's unstoppable elephants, how do you convince your own people that inaction is the path to victory? Both Pericles and Fabius face scorn, ridicule, even accusations of cowardice. Yet their tactics ultimately saved their civilizations. What hidden genius allowed them to see beyond the battlefield? And how did they manage to hold firm against overwhelming pressure, both external and internal? We'll not only uncover their extraordinary methods, but also extract the timeless lessons in strategic patience and resilient leadership that resonate even today. If you're ready to redefine what it means to win a war, then hit that like button. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And of course, subscribe to Ancient Wisdom Unveiled for more epic ancient insights. Let's begin. The life of Pericles. In Rome, they say, Julius Caesar once rebuked wealthy foreigners who doted on pet monkeys and lapdogs. "Do your women bear no children?" he asked, a reproach to those who squander human affection on beasts when it belongs to mankind. So too, with the love of knowledge, let us not lavish it on empty trifles, but turn it toward noble examples. Studying should not merely entertain the mind, but shape it. We enjoy fortune's gifts, but we admire virtuous action, and in admiring, we long to imitate. This is why I write about the lives of men, that by recalling their deeds we may be stirred to follow them. Here, then, begins the 10th book of my series, The Life of Pericles, the Athenian, placed alongside Fabius Maximus, the Roman. Both men were of gentle temper, just, enduring with patience the folly of their countrymen. And both, through long-suffering wisdom, preserved their states. Pericles was of the tribe Achamantis of the Demi-Calargos, descended from nobility on both sides. His father Xanthippus defeated the Persians at Mycale. His mother Agariste came from the great line of Cleisthenes, founder of Athenian democracy. While pregnant, she dreamed she bore a lion. A few days later, she gave birth to Pericles. Nature gave him a well-proportioned frame, save for his head, long and out of scale. Thus sculptors hid it always beneath a helmet, and the comic poets called him Squillhead and the man-compelling head. They jested, yet even in ridicule they acknowledged his weight and majesty. He was taught music by Damon, whom Aristotle says was really a sophist in disguise. Under the name of music, he trained Pericles for politics, until citizens, suspicious, banished him by ostracism. Pericles also studied with Zeno of Elea, master of argument and dilemma, but most deeply he was shaped by Anaxagoras of Clazomenae. This philosopher, named Nous, or intelligence, taught that mind and reason, not chance, governed the universe. From him Pericles drew a sublime style of speech, high spirit, composure of countenance, and calm, unshaken dignity. Men noticed that he could stand in the marketplace all day, unmoved by abuse flung at him by some scurrilous fellow. When darkness came, he calmly bade a servant light the man home with a torch. Such gravity impressed the multitude. The comic poet Ion called him proud, even contemptuous. But friends replied, "If pride brings such loftiness of spirit, let us all grow proud." From Anaxagoras too, Pericles learned to cast aside superstition, not despising the divine, but seeking piety in understanding. Once a ram with but a single horn in its forehead was brought to him. Lampon the prophet declared it a sign that two parties in Athens, the faction of Thucydides and of Pericles, would be united in his hand. Anaxagoras, opening the skull, showed that the brain was crowded all to one side. Some admired the prophecy, some the science. Perhaps both were right. One saw the cause, another the meaning. As a youth, Perikles shunned politics, fearing suspicion that he might aim at tyranny. His voice was soft, his eloquence ready, and he resembled in aspect the old despot Pisistratus. So he served first in war, proving himself brave in the field. But when Aristides was dead, Themistocles banished, and Cimon often away on foreign campaigns, Perikles came forward. Rich, high-born though he was, he chose to lead the people's party, opposing the nobles. With Cimon beloved of the aristocracy, Perikles saw safety only in becoming champion of the crowd. He altered his life accordingly. No festive dinners, no strolls in friendly company. He walked only the straight road between his house and the assembly. He never dined with friends in all his long career, save once at his cousin's wedding, and then only until the libations were poured, leaving at once thereafter. He feared familiarity would break his grandeur. Better, he thought, to appear rarely before the people, like the sacred trireme Solomenia, kept only for great missions. Lesser matters he left to allies such as Ephialtes, who curtailed the power of the Areopagus, and, as the poet said, poured forth for the people a draught full and unmixed of liberty. Thus, when Perikles did appear, it was in lofty majesty. Armed with philosophy, he wove natural science into oratory. With a voice grave and unbroken, he spoke as from the heavens. And so Athens began to call him Olympian, thunderous, lofty, impossible to withstand. Some said he was called Olympian because of his lofty eloquence, thundering and flashing in debate, rolling fateful thunder from his tongue. Others thought it was for his victorious generalship or the glory of the monuments he raised, that new Athens which seemed almost celestial in its splendor. Likely, all these causes together gave him his name. Thucydides, son of Milesius, the great conservative rival, once jested that debating him was like wrestling smoke. When I throw him down, he convinces the spectators he was never even touched. His tongue was mighty, but never reckless. Perikles would ascend the bema only after prayer, asking that no unfitting word might fall from his lips. He left no writings. Yet of the few sayings remembered, one survives, that Aegina is the Isor of the Piraeus, and another more foreboding, I see war descending upon Athens from Peloponnesus. Thucydides, the historian, later described Athens under Perikles as a democracy in name, but in fact the rule of its first citizen. For though the state obeyed the people obeyed him. Yet his rise had not been easy. He had to displace Cimon, wealthy, generous, beloved for his victories against Persia. Cimon daily fed poor Athenians at his table, clothed the aged, and left his lands unfenced, so that any might take their fruit. Perikles could not rival such largesse from private fortune. Instead, advised by Damonides, he turned to the public purse, theater money, jury pay, stipends for magistrates. Thus the people's loyalty shifted to him, and with their support he broke the power of the conservative Areopagus Council and sent Cimon into exile by ostracism. But exile was only for 10 years. When Sparta invaded Tanagra with a great force, the Athenians marched out. Cimon appeared, armor on, eager to fight for Athens. Yet Perikles' partisans expelled him, still denouncing him as a friend to Sparta. The battle was hard. Perikles fought more fiercely than ever before, reckless, daring, surpassing all. Cimon's comrades, branded Prolaconian, stood their ground and fell together to a man. Athens, defeated, longed for Cimon back. Perikles himself yielded to popular grief, proposed his recall, and reconciled the city. Perhaps, too, an earlier truce had been struck. Cimon to war against Persia abroad, Perikles to hold command at home. In time Cimon died in Cyprus. shortly after Ephialtes, that stern reformer and ally of Pericles, was murdered by Aristodicos of Tanagra, an agent of the nobles. And now, with Cimon and Ephialtes both gone, Pericles remained without a rival, until the conservatives set up Thucydides of Alopique, Cimon's kinsman, subtler in politics than in arms. Thucydides kept the nobles herded together as one block. It was now the few against the many, the party of Pericles against the party of Thucydides. Pericles courted and strengthened the people. He filled the year with festivals, spectacles, and processions, teaching Athenians to delight in grace and refinement. He sent fleets yearly to sea, manned by citizens for hire to perfect their seamanship. He planted colonies across the Aegean and beyond, as far as the Chersonese, Naxos, Andros, Thrace, and even the new city of Thurii in Italy. By these settlements he fed the poor, banished the idle, and extended Athenian presence like watchtowers over allies. Then came the greatest enterprise and the most resented, his building program. With a tribute of the allies, once kept on Delos, but now housed in Athens, Pericles raised his marble city of gods. Opponents cried out, "We have disgraced ourselves." That money was gathered for defense against Persia, and now we squander it to gild Athena like a vain courtesan, smothering her in jewels and fine robes. Pericles stood firm. "The allies pay for safety, and they have it," he said. "Ships, men, and walls we provide. The rest, the surplus, we owe to ourselves. Why not give Athens works that will shine through all ages? War cannot last forever, but beauty, art, and piety endure. Moreover, these works are no idle ornaments. They are the people's lifeblood. Carpenters, smiths, shipwrights, quarrymen, sculptors, painters, embroiderers, all labor together. Sailors bring stone by sea, wagoners haul timber by land. Every trade employed, each man earning his wage. So Athens grows rich twice over, in her treasures and in her citizens. And thus the Parthenon rose on the Acropolis, with ivory, gold, cypress, marble, and bronze. Thus temples, statues, and theaters filled the city. To this day they bear witness that the age of Pericles was not fable, but a reality carved in stone. The works of Pericles were vast, swift, and eternal. Temples of marble and bronze, colonnades and theaters, the long walls and the Parthenon, all rose as if by enchantment. Each seemed the labor of ages, yet all were completed in but a few short years, beneath the hand of one man's administration. Painters like Zeuxis once said that works made hastily rarely endure, yet Pericles' monuments, raised with incredible speed, have outlived centuries, fresh as though the chisels touched them only yesterday, blooming with ageless youth. The master of all was Phidias, who directed the vision. Architects of genius worked beneath him, Callicrates and Ictinos, who raised the Parthenon upon the ruined site of the old Hecatompedon. Coroebus began the temple at Eleusis. Metagenes and Xenocles carried it forward. Callicrates also undertook the long wall, mocked in comedy as a thing built in speeches, not in stone. The Odeon rose in imitation of the tent of Xerxes, with tier upon tier of seats and forests of columns, beneath a many-sloping roof. Comic poets jeered, saying that Pericles bore the Odeon high upon his head like a dome-shaped helmet. To it he drew all Greece, for he made the Panathenea a contest of music, laying down rules himself for song and harp and flute, and judging the performances. From then on, the Odeon was the home of music in Athens. The Propylaea, gateway of the Acropolis, was finished in 5 years by the architect Nicycles. During the work, a man fell from great height and lay dying. Pericles grieved, until Athene appeared in a dream to him with a remedy. The man recovered, and in gratitude Pericles raised a statue to Athene the healer near her ancient altar. And there too stood the golden statue of the goddess, made by Phidias, whose hand imprint remained upon almost all the works. His intimacy with Pericles bred envy and lies, that women came up to the Acropolis to see the works, and that Phidias' friendship was cover for Pericles' intrigues, that Pericles gave peacocks as bribes to ladies he corrupted in Pericles' name. Satirists wove slander, and even Stesimbrotus of Thassos, writing in prose, told abominable falsehoods of Pericles' conduct in his own household. The party of Thucydides, calling him prodigal, accused him of wasting Greek tribute. Pericles stood before the assembly and asked, "Does all this cost much?" The people answered, "Yes, very much." Pericles replied, "Then let it be written not in Athens' account, but in my own. Inscribe my name upon all." At this, the crowd shouted with one voice, "No." They would bear their part. They clamored for him to use the treasury as he deemed best. Soon after, Pericles put Thucydides himself on trial for ostracism, and prevailed. His rival was exiled, his party dissolved, his power unchallenged. From that day, Athens was his. No longer courting the crowd, he ruled them, sometimes yielding to their will, sometimes compelling them against it, like a physician alternating gentle draughts and harsh remedies to cure a sickness. He played upon their hopes and fears, raising their courage when they despaired, checking their arrogance when they soared too high. Plato said he made of rhetoric the true art of swaying men's souls, striking their characters like the strings of an instrument. And beneath all was his integrity. Thucydides himself wrote that his strength lay less in eloquence than in incorruptibility. Rich and mighty, master of fleets, allies, tribute, and marble wealth, yet he never increased his patrimony by a single drachma beyond what his father left him. His household ran not extravagantly, but with a strict balance of accounts. The year's produce was sold, provisions bought with the proceeds, the records kept by a single capable servant. His sons and the women of the house found him sparing, even niggardly. But Pericles preferred order to waste. Unlike Anaxagoras the philosopher, who let his estate collapse, Pericles kept his modest fortune intact, devoting himself to a statesman's proper business, sustaining Athens through the resources of the empire. Yet even in Anaxagoras' poverty, Pericles never forgot the philosopher's worth. When told that his old master had covered his head and chosen to starve himself, Pericles hastened in sorrow, begging him to live. And Anaxagoras uncovered his face. Pericles, those who would use a lamp must supply it oil. In foreign affairs, too, Pericles dreamed grandly. He decreed that all the Greeks from Asia and Europe, from every coast, should gather in Athens to deliberate, to restore the temples burned by the Persians, to fulfill vows left unpaid to the gods, to make the sea free for all men to sail in peace. Envoys went forth across Greece calling for a great congress. Yet the project failed, thwarted chiefly by Spartan malice. Still, it showed the scale of Pericles' vision. Athens, not Sparta, as leader of united Hellas in peace as well as war. In the field, Pericles was marked less by daring gambles than by cautious mastery. He would not, if he could help it, stake the city's fate upon a battle whose outcome was doubtful. Never, he used to say, shall any Athenian come by his death from recklessness of mind. He warned against Tolmides, son of Ptolemaeus, who rashly gathered 1,000 young men to strike Boeotia. In the assembly Pericles counseled him, "If you will not listen to Pericles, at least take counsel of time, the best adviser of all." Tolmides marched anyway, and soon perished at Chaeronea with many noble youths of Athens. Then men turned back in awe to Pericles' prudence. His greatest campaign for safety was in the distant Chersonese, where he planted 1,000 colonists and threw a wall across the isthmus, sealing the Thracian raiders from preying upon the peninsula. Yet the renown of his name came from ventures far grander. Launching from Pegae with 100 triremes, he swept around the Peloponnesus, ravaging the coasts, marching inland, striking terror where no Athenian army had set foot. At Nemea he defeated the Sicyonians and set up his trophy. He ferried fresh allies from Achaia, sailed across the Corinthian Gulf, stormed through Acarnania, pushed the Aeneadae into their walls. Through all this vast circuit, he returned to Athens without loss, his fleet splendid still, his men untouched. To the Black Sea, too, he sailed, displaying Athens' power before barbarian chiefs, aiding Greek cities, placing colonists in Sinope, where the despot Timecilian had been expelled. Everywhere Athens' reach grew, and yet Perikles always checked wild ambition. He opposed plans to strike Persia's seaboard, or Egypt, or Sicily, or even Carthage, as later firebrands like Alcibiades would press. Let Athens keep what she holds, he urged. Guard empire. Waste it not chasing shadows. His chief enemy was Sparta. During the Sacred War, when the Spartans seized Delphi for the Delphians, Perikles marched and gave it back to Phocis, restoring balance and inscribing upon the sacred bronze wolf an oracle of Athens, to stand against that of the Spartans. But the empire proves ever restless. Euboea revolted, and even as Perikles drew troops to subdue it, news came of Sparta's king Pleistoanax marching into Attica. Perikles withdrew at once. He would not hazard an open battle with a youth-led army swayed by the regent Cleandridas, whom Perikles won with hidden gold. And so the Spartans withdrew. In Athens' accounts, no question was asked of 10 talents for a necessary purpose. Later men, whispered Perikles, sent bribes yearly to Sparta, buying time for Athens to prepare. He returned to Euboea with force, expelled the rich horsemen from Chalkis, and settled Athenian colonists in Hestiaea, driving out its people in revenge for killing the crew of an Athenian ship. Harsh justice, yet it bound the land to Athens with settlers' roots. Soon after came war with Samos, the war that forever linked Perikles with Aspasia. Aspasia was a woman of Miletus, daughter of Axiochus, famed as another Thargelia, the Ionian courtesan who drew Greek states to Persia by her beauty and wit. Aspasia, too, was brilliant. Philosophers like Socrates visited her house, even bringing their wives to hear her discourse. To many, she was a teacher of rhetoric. To Perikles, she was more. He dismissed his lawful wife, with whom he had quarreled, and from then on lived steadfastly with Aspasia, whom he adored, never leaving or entering his home by day without a kiss. Comic poets spared nothing. They named her Omphale Deianira, even Hera herself, mocking Perikles as enslaved by her. They jeered that she kept harlots in her house. And when Perikles led Athens against Samos, men whispered he did so to please her, since Samos fought her native Miletus over possession of Priene. The Samians defied Athenian arbitration, so Perikles sailed, replaced their oligarchy, took 50 hostages and their children, and set them at Lemnos. He scorned talents offered for their ransom, scorned 10,000 from Pisithens, the Persian satrap. Returning home, he left a democracy. But when Pisithens helped recover the hostages, Samos rose again, resolute, proud, and bold enough to challenge Athens at sea. Perikles met them off the Goats' Island, with only 44 ships against their 70. It was a crushing victory. He seized their harbor, shut them up within their walls, and set siege. Even then, the Samians fought on under their own walls, but at last fresh reinforcements sealed their fate. Thus Perikles, always cautious, sometimes stern, pursued the work of empire, while beside him moved Aspasia, admired, reviled, whispered of by poets, but adored by him, a new, triumphantly guiding an Olympian king. After 9 months' stubborn siege, Samos yielded. Pericles tore down her walls, confiscated her fleet, and laid upon her a heavy tribute. Thus ended that proud island's defiance. Stories spread, some true, some cruel inventions, that Athenians had treated the Samians with great brutality. But whatever the embellishments, the victory was costly, and Elpenike, sister of Cimon, met Pericles after his funeral oration and stung him with words. "You earned your crown, Pericles, not for triumph over Phoenicians or Persians as Cimon did, but for ruining your own allies, your own kin." At this Pericles merely smiled, repeating archly a verse of Archilochus, "Too old art thou for perfume." Yet privately, friend said, he measured himself against Agamemnon. That king took a decade to break a barbarian town. I, in 9 months, subdued the greatest city of Ionia. And in truth, the contest was great, the issue doubtful. Thucydides himself admits that Athens' sea empire lay almost at the mercy of Samos. But soon darker clouds gathered, the storm of the Peloponnesian War. Corcyra and Corinth fought for mastery of the sea. Pericles urged Athens to aid Corcyra, an island with a fleet second only to Athens. 10 ships only he first sent, under Lacedaemonius, son of Cimon, for he wished to slight the house of Cimon, tying them to scant success or failure. When that little squadron proved inadequate, more ships followed, but too late to prevent suspicion from taking root. Corinth, enraged, laid charges before Sparta. The Corinthians were not alone. Megara, excluded now from all Athenian harbors and markets, cried grievance. Aegina whispered a complaint. Potidaea revolted, a colony of Corinth though subject to Athens, maddening both sides. At Sparta, King Archidamus pleaded for moderation, urging arbitration, but allies shouted for war. What might have been settled, perhaps, hung now upon one question. Would Athens revoke the Megarian decree? Pericles said no. An embassy came, pleading. He claimed religion bound him. The decree was inscribed upon a tablet that law forbade to be removed. Then turn the tablet to the wall, an ambassador mocked. There is no law against that. Athens still refused. And men muttered that the decree's cause was not law, nor even politics, but Periclean pride and love. For beyond official charges, that the Megarians had trespassed upon sacred land, rumor whispered that Aspasia was at quarrel with Megara, and even Aristophanes in his comedies turned to ribald rhyme, lampooning the matter as a feud over stolen courtesans. Amidst these tensions, enemies struck at Pericles from another front. His closest ally and artist, Phidias. He had overseen Athena's golden colossus, his genius known throughout Hellas. But envy and malice moved against him. Men bribed his workmate Menon to accuse him of theft. Phidias had foreseen this. By Pericles' advice, the golden parts of the statue had been cast separately, so any might weigh them. They were weighed, no fraud discovered. Yet Phidias was undone not by theft, but by art. His rivals pointed to the shield of Athena, where he had hidden his own likeness, and even that of Pericles himself, beneath the guise of combatants. For this impious boldness, men said he was thrown into prison, where he died, whether by sickness or poison laid, so that suspicion might fall upon Pericles. And while Phidias perished, betrayal was rewarded. Menon, the informer, received immunity and public protection, honored for destroying a genius. Thus the city that gleamed with temples and statues in Pericles' age was built also on envy, faction, and whispering scandal. And as Sparta's chorus of allies cried ever louder for war, the blame fell upon one man, Pericles, whose decree on Megara, whose pride before ambassage, whose entanglements in art and love, all seemed to drive Athens toward the great conflagration. Envy and rancor now gathered thickly about Perikles. Aspasia, the woman he loved, was accused in court of impiety, charged with harboring freeborn Athenian women for his intrigues. The philosopher Anaxagoras, his master, was attacked under a new decree against those who explained heavenly phenomena by reason rather than piety. Even Phidias' ruin had left a stain that touched him. The comic playwright Hermippus, the agitator Diopithes, and others pressed their slanders hard, while Dracontides carried motion that he be forced to render account before a jury of 1,500. Aspasia was acquitted. Men whispered because Perikles, unbending before nations, shed tears for her before the court. Anaxagoras he quietly spirited from the city, lest philosophy itself be condemned. But Phidias lay dead in his cell, Menon the informer rewarded, and Perikles' name clouded with suspicion. So to silence his accusers, he turned Athens outward, into war. The quarrel with Megara, exclusion from all Athenian markets, disputes over sacred land, small provocations sharpened into causes for conflict. The Spartans demanded Athens drive out the accursed thing, meaning Perikles himself, by ancestry tied to the cursed line of the Alcmeonidae. Instead, the Athenians rallied round him more firmly. To be hated by Sparta seemed proof of his greatness. Then Archidamus and the Peloponnesian host, 60,000 strong, invaded Attica. They stormed as far as Acharnae, expecting to draw Athens out, to sting her pride into open battle. But Perikles held firm. Trees cut down will grow again, he said, but men once lost are not so easily replaced. He closed the gates, garrisoned the walls, resisted the clamor of friends, of foes, of poets mocking him as a coward, and of Cleon, gaining the demagogue's favor by inflaming the mob. Like a captain in a storm who trims the ship while passengers cry out, he steered steady, though mocked as Olympian. Now, in scorn more than awe, he ordered fleets abroad to ravage Peloponnesus, refused to hazard the city at home. He wasted Megara. He expelled the Aeginetans and parceled their island among citizens, sparing none. War bit both ways. Athens and her enemies matched hurt for hurt. The death stroke came from neither spear nor torch, but from heaven. Plague broke among the crowded city. Hemmed within walls, the people died by thousands. Men said it was Perikles' doing. His policy had drawn them into close quarters, where contagion spread like fire. The flower of Athens' youth withered. Despair roared against him. To rouse courage, Perikles manned 150 ships, filled with soldiers and horses. But as he embarked, a total eclipse darkened the sun. Panic spread. Perikles, serene, drew his cloak across his pilot's eyes. Is that a portent? No, merely darkness. Then what differs this eclipse, except that a greater body cast the shade? Reason steadied terror. Yet the fleet achieved little. The plague struck all. Epidaurus, besieged, escaped. Athens returned wearier, angrier. The mob condemned Perikles, stripped him of command, fined him heavily, 15 talents or more. His enemies rejoiced, but soon regret overtook the city. They found no other leader equal. Like a bee that spends its sting, the anger of Athens had left it weaker. Perikles, broken by private grief, death of his sister, estrangement with his son Xanthippus, most of his kin perished in the plague, yet kept public poise. Only when his last legitimate son, Perikles, died, leading the funeral garland, he broke into tears, the iron mask of his life dissolving at last in sobs. The people called him back. They begged him to guide the ship of state again. He returned, subdued, sorrowful, but faithful. They granted his request to overturn his own stringent law of citizenship, that his illegitimate child by Aspasia might be enrolled to continue his line. Then sickness laid him low. The plague consumed him slowly, wasting strength, but not spirit. On his bed, friends gathered, speaking of his victories, his trophies, his conquests. Perikles, faint but aware, whispered, "Strange that you remember the deeds of fortune, which others too have done, yet forget my greatest claim to fame. No Athenian has ever put on mourning by my fault." So he died, gentle, incorruptible, lofty in temper, proud but never cruel, stern but never spiteful. In life they muttered despot, monarch, Olympian, and envied his power. In death they saw that only his hand had kept Athens free from corruption, disorder, and greed. Without him, the empire he had held together began to split, dissension, license, venality, all bursting forth like fire long banked beneath iron. And so Perikles left his city dazzling in marble, mighty in fleets, unmatched in memory, the golden figure of an age that bore his name, and perished without him. Life of Fabius Maximus. The Fabii were ancient and noble, descended, some said, from a nymph loved by Hercules upon the Tiber. Others traced their name to the Latin footy, to dig, for they were said to have been the first to dig pits in hunting. Despite their lineage, the house became one of the greatest in Rome. From them, after many generations, came Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, the wart, from a blemish on his lip, but gentler nicknamed as a boy Ovicula, the lamb, for his mildness, slowness, and cautious ways. As a child he seemed dull, slow to learn, hesitant in play. Few discerned the strength veiled beneath the quiet. But as he grew, it became clear. He was deliberate because he weighed deeply, calm because he thought before he acted, steadfast because he would not gamble Rome's fate on chance. His oratory was plain and weighty, not adorned. Maxims rolled from him like iron. They said he spoke with something of the force of Thucydides. He served Rome long, 5 times consul, first triumphing over the Ligurians. But the truest test came when Hannibal shattered Roman armies at the Trebia, swept into Italy, and destroyed Flaminius and his legions at Lake Trasimene. Terror seized Rome. Omens filled the sky, prodigies abounded, and panic raced through the forum like fire in dry reeds. The people cried for one ruler with unfettered command. All eyes turned to one man, Fabius Maximus. He was named dictator. At once he showed Rome the grandeur of his office, 24 lictors before him, the consul stripped of insignia, and the city reassured by solemn sacrifice. He declared it was not the soldiers or the arms, but impiety and rashness that had ruined Flaminius. He vowed of her sacrum, every beast born that spring dedicated to the gods, and promised games and sacrifices with almost mystical precision in the sums decreed. He armed Rome with piety, not superstition, strengthening hearts with reverence, steadying fear with hope. Then he marched, not to meet Hannibal in battle, but to shadow him, harass him, waste his strength. While Hannibal ravaged, Fabius clung to the ridges, secure upon the high ground, watching, waiting. The people mocked him as Hannibal's lackey. Minucius, his master of horse, scorned his caution, taunting that the dictator only led them to mountain seats to watch Italy burn. Soldiers whispered Fabius was no general at all. But Hannibal alone understood. He felt the deadliness of this patience, knew that unless he forced Rome to fight, his brilliant little army would rot away in a hostile land. Again and again he tried to draw Fabius down. Again and again Fabius refused. Then fortune offered Fabius his chance. Hannibal's guides led him astray into the valley of Casilinum near the river Vulturnus, a trap of mountains and marsh. Fabius seized the high ground, barred the pass, harassed his rear. Hannibal crucified the treacherous guides, but he was hemmed in. Despair shook the Carthaginian camp until cunning found escape. By night, he bound torches to the horns of 2,000 captured oxen. The beasts, maddened by fire burning at their brows, stampeded across the ridges like a river of flames. Roman sentries looked down and thought an army was upon them, marching with fiery brands. Panic seized them, they abandoned their post. Hannibal's men slipped out through the pass, his light troops seizing the heights, his main army escaping with its plunder. By dawn Fabius knew the trick, but fearing ambush in the dark, held back. With light he pursued, clashing with Hannibal's rear guard in broken ground, but was repulsed by the swift Spanish mountaineers. So shame returned with a fiercer sting. Rome scorned her dictator, murmuring he had lost even the art of delay. And Hannibal deepened their suspicion. While burning every field, he spared the estates of Fabius untouched, setting guards that no harm be done. Rome muttered betrayal. Minucius' friends fanned the rumor. Fabius conspired with the enemy. Then came the matter of prisoners. The exchange was agreed, man for man, and ransom for the surplus. Rome's Senate refused to pay, for 240 still held, branding their capture cowardice unworthy of ransom. But Fabius would not break faith. Though without a coin himself, he ordered his son to sell a portion of their estate. With this money he ransomed the captives, forgiving their debt to him. Thus was shown the man Rome had chosen, silent, steady, incorrupt, slighted by his people, respected by his enemy. Hannibal might deride the city, ravage its fields, but in Perikles he found his equal, a general who fought not with glory, but with time. And time, as Fabius knew, was the truest ally Rome possessed. When the priests recalled Fabius to Rome for sacred duties, he left the army in Minucius' hands, strictly warning him against battle, beseeching him not to hazard all by rashness. Minucius immediately disobeyed. Seeing Hannibal with many troops absent for forage, he struck the remainder, drove them into camp, and bloodied them enough to taste a false victory. Hannibal gathered Minucius escaped, but the army was aflame with confidence, and Rome rejoiced. Fabius, upon hearing, sighed, "I dread Minucius' success more than his defeats." But the people, whipped to frenzy by Tribune Metilius, clamored that Minucius had shown the way, while Fabius dallied like a traitor, giving Hannibal time to root in Italy. Against all precedent, they decreed Minucius equal in power with the dictator, a humiliation Rome once would never have dared. But Fabius quietly endured. He who was called a coward did not defend himself. "Scoffs touch only those they can wound," he said. Grieving not for his honor, but for Rome's folly, he returned to camp. There Minucius grew insolent, demanded alternating command. Fabius refused, and instead split the legions, 2 with him, 2 with Minucius, rather than share dominion with recklessness. Hannibal swiftly took his chance. Before them lay a hill commanding supplies. By night he filled the plain with hidden troops, and at dawn feigned a move upon the height. Minucius rushed out with lights, cavalry, then all his legions. He stormed the hill, unaware his flank lay open. Hannibal's signal rang. The buried soldiers rose from ditches. The Numidians swept in. Romans were thrown into confusion, encircled, driven to ruin. From his camp Fabius watched, foreseeing disaster. "By Hercules," he cried, striking his thigh, "Minucius has ruined himself. Not so soon as I feared, yet faster than he should." Then to his men, "Forward! Think not of Minucius the rival, but of Minucius the brave Roman undone. We shall reproach him later, now we save him." The cloud that hung upon the mountains burst. Fabius' disciplined legions marched, scattered the Numidians, forced Hannibal's rear guard back, and rallied the broken Romans. Hannibal himself, recognizing a stroke, drew away, jesting grimly. "Did I not say this dark cloud on the hills would one day break with storm upon us?" Afterward, Fabius uttered no insult, but Minucius, chastened, gathered his men. "Soldiers, one day has taught me more than all my past years. I am not able to command, but must obey. Fabius is conqueror twice over, Hannibal by valor, myself by wisdom. Then he led his eagles into Fabius' camp, set them down before him, and saluted him as father. His legions hailed Fabius' soldiers as their patrons, giving thanks as freedmen to liberators. Tears and embraces filled the camp. Romans reunited, by disaster averted. Soon after, Fabius resigned his post. Consuls were chosen again. But one of them was Terentius Varro, fiery, low-born, beloved of the multitude, boasting he would conquer Hannibal on the first day he saw him. Never had Rome raised more hostmen, 88,000. In dread, Fabius urged his colleague Paulus Emilius to restrain Varro. You must fight not only Hannibal's legions, but the rashness of your fellow consul. If only a year passes, Hannibal must wither. Already his army wastes, yet none of our cities join him. Let time betray him. Resist a single battle. Paulus assented in spirit, but Varro's turn to command came soon. Near Cannae, by the river Aufidus, the signal was given, a scarlet cloak raised. Hannibal arrayed his army. The weak center bulged forth, the strong wings held back, waiting like jaws to close. When the Romans pressed and drove the center in, the wings folded round, enclosing them in a crescent, cavalry striking their rear. Strangling clouds of dust blinded them. Numidians scythed down fleeing horse and man alike. The Roman host was shattered, 50,000 slain. Varro escaped. Paulus, gashed and broken, sat bloodied on a stone. Cornelius Lentulus urged him to take his horse and flee. Paulus refused. Tell Fabius, he said, that I obeyed his counsel, but was vanquished, first by Varro, then by Hannibal. And there he fell beneath the Carthaginian storm. Rome lay gashed, her youth fallen, her allies trembling. Hannibal's captains pressed him onward to Rome itself. In 5 days you shall feast in the capital. But he delayed, whether by fate's hand or by error. Maharbal said bitterly, You know how to win victory, Hannibal, not how to use it. Yet from that field, once wandering without city or port, Hannibal made Italy shake. Capua, the greatest city after Rome, opened to him. Allies faltered. Blood reddened the land. And in Rome, men remembered the delayer, Fabius, mocked as coward, long patient, who would prove, when all rash pride was slain, at Cannae, the savior of the state by his very restraint. So it was proved true, the words of Euripides, that adversity tries our friends. What once they mocked as timidity in Fabius, Rome now hailed as more than human foresight. After Cannae, when the city wept and trembled, it was to him that all fled, as men took refuge at an altar. Calm amid the storm, he moved through the streets with gentle reproofs, silenced wailing, imposed 30 days of mourning, and then forbade all further lamentation. He steadied the Senate, encouraged the magistrates, and ordered gates guarded against panic flight. He guided the city through terror with composure, proclaiming that Rome must look not backwards at loss, but forwards at duty. Even as Consul Varro, blamed for the disaster, slunk home, the Senate and people greeted him not with reproach, but with praise, that he had not despaired of the state. And it was Fabius' voice among them that taught Rome this moderation. So began the long partnership of shield and sword. Fabius the shield, Marcellus the sword of Rome. Marcellus struck like a torrent, fierce and daring, while Fabius undermined with slow attrition, like a steady river wearing stone. Both bore 5 consulships, both strained Hannibal's strength, Marcellus by blows, Fabius by withering delay. Hannibal himself admitted that he feared Fabius though he would not fight, and was tired of fighting Marcellus though he could defeat him. Cunning once nearly trapped even Fabius. Letters forged from Metapontum hinting at treachery and surrender. Moved, he set out by night, but omens warned him, and he turned back, learning soon it was Hannibal's deceit. So heaven itself seemed to guard the policy of the delayer. Toward allies Fabius showed tact more than terror, preferring trust to harshness. When he discovered a Marsian noble plotting revolt, he did not punish, but honored him openly, turning a rebel into a faithful supporter. When he found a Lucanian soldier absent for love of a girl, he seized her quietly, then brought soldier and beloved together. Here is your jailer. Stay true in camp, for it is love, not dishonor, that led you astray. Thus he tempered discipline with mercy, believing men best bound by kindness. He regained Tarentum too, by guile, if not with glory. Through the bribery of Bruttian officers and the lure of a woman's passion, the gates were opened. Though Hannibal hurried to save it, he arrived too late. Tarentum fell, many slain, 30,000 sold into bondage, treasure of 3,000 talents taken for Rome. Leave the Tarentines their angry gods, Fabius said, sparing their temples, but taking Hercules' statue for the capital. Hannibal, hearing of the loss, confessed bitterly, Rome too has her Hannibal. We lost Tarentum as we won it by treachery. For this Fabius triumphed a second time, his glory even greater than his first triumph. Yet envy never departed. Marcus Livius, who had once lost Tarentum but kept its citadel to the end, snarled in the Senate that credit was his. Fabius smiled. Indeed, had you not lost it, I could never have retaken it. He showed the same modesty even to his own son when the younger Fabius was raised consul. Approaching him on horseback, the son ordered him dismount, as the office demanded reverence. The crowd was scandalized, but the old man ran to him, embraced him. You do rightly, my son. In Rome, even fathers bow to the Republic's law. He bore the death of that son also with Roman fortitude, speaking the funeral oration himself and sending his written words to friends. But age now dimmed the delayer, and a new brilliance rose. Scipio, fiery and young, returned from Spain in triumph, dreaming of Africa and Carthage itself. Fabius opposed him at every turn. He warned the Senate that the city was endangered by youthful recklessness. He tried to bar him from funds, from troops, from volunteers. He claimed it was envy. Others thought it prudent caution. Yet the people, eager for deliverance, trusted Scipio. When news of Scipio's lightning victories in Africa arrived, of Numidian kings captured, camps burnt, embassies sent to call Hannibal home, Rome exulted. Fabius still muttered caution. None should trust the fortune of a single man. But many saw only jealousy or the excessive terror of old age. Fabius did not live to hear of Zama or Hannibal's ruin or the final triumph of his country. He died, it is said, about the time Hannibal was recalled to Africa, and Rome, though not by public expense, buried him with universal reverence, all citizens contributing the smallest coin, as though laying to rest the father of them all. Thus ended Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, the delayer, mocked as coward, proved as savior, slow to act, but steadfast, incorruptible, merciful, tireless, the man who steadied Rome in her darkest hour. The comparison of Perikles and Fabius Maximus. Such, then, were the lives of these two men. Both proved supreme in war and politics, yet in very different theaters and under very different fortunes. Perikles inherited Athens at her height, rich in tribute, strong in allies, lifted by successes of Cimon, Myronides, Leocrates, and Ptolemies. He ruled over a city ablaze with prosperity, where the peril lay not in ruin, but in the arrogance prosperity breeds. Fabius, by contrast, stood forth when Rome seemed near her end. Italy blazed with ruin, consuls and generals slain, rivers choked with the dead. Yet he alone, steady and unmoved, propped up the falling state, and kept it from disastrous overthrow. Which task was greater, perhaps to restrain the unbridled pride of Athens, perhaps to restore the shaken heart of Rome. Surely both demanded greatness of mind. As for their actions, the capture of Samos answers to the retaking of Tarentum. The conquest of Euboea may be set against Rome's recovery of the Campanian towns. Yet Fabius never sought pitched battle after his first triumph, while Pericles could boast 9 trophies won by land or sea. And yet there was one act of Fabius beyond all Periclean deeds, when he plucked Minucius and a whole Roman army from Hannibal's trap. That rescue united courage, generalship, and, for the first time in Roman history, magnanimity toward a rival. Still, Pericles made no such blunder as when Fabius, having caught Hannibal in a defile, lost him again by the trick of the blazing cattle, and awoke too slow at daybreak to strike. If it marks a true statesman not only to act in the present, but to see the end, then Pericles stands vindicated. He foresaw that the Peloponnesian War would waste down Athens by her own rashness. And so it proved. Fabius, on the other hand, opposed Scipio's African venture as folly, and Rome's triumph belied him. It is as grave an error to lose advantage through diffidence as to stumble through overconfidence. Both are failings common to generals not wholly perfect in wisdom. Politically, too, they diverge. The Peloponnesian War lies heavy on Pericles' memory, said to have sprung from his pride in refusing all concessions to the Spartans. Yet no man imagines Fabius would have yielded to Carthage. He would shoulder any peril for Rome's sovereignty. Still, mark the gentleness of Fabius towards Minucius, who had insulted him. His conduct shines brighter than Pericles' harsh exile of Cimon and Thucydides, men of noble birth and good service. The reach of power differed too. Pericles guided Athens as no one before or after, bending the wills of generals and assemblies alike. Only Tolmides opposed him and perished for it. By contrast, Fabius, cautious in his own command, could not impose his judgment upon others. Thus Rome endured many defeats which his foresight might have prevented, had he swayed as Pericles swayed his city. On money and integrity, both are without stain. Pericles refused gifts and bribes from princes, keeping his hand pure while immense treasures passed beneath it. Fabius, out of his own estate, redeemed citizens taken captive, forgiving their debt. His ransom was but 6 talents, yet it shone no less brightly in Roman eyes than the millions Pericles scorned among the Greeks. And for enduring monuments, who may compare? Pericles raised the gleaming Parthenon, the Propylaea, the Odeon, statues of Phidias, temples and marbles that crowned Athens as the school of Hellas. Fabius built no such wonders. Indeed, all the works of republican Rome together, before the Caesars, cannot rival the magnificence or beauty with which Pericles clothed his city. Thus in arms Fabius was the savior of Rome in calamity, in civic life the gentlest of men. Pericles was Olympian, ruling fortune's flood with godlike poise, and leaving behind visible marvels that still endure. Each, in his own way, embodied the virtue his city most required. Pericles, the proud bridle of democracy. Fabius, the steadfast shield of a state tottering to her fall.